My name is Amelia, and on the morning of my third wedding anniversary, I found out I was pregnant. By sunset, I had left my husband without telling him I was carrying his child. The pregnancy test was still tucked inside my coat pocket when I pulled into our driveway. I had spent my lunch break staring at 2 pink lines in a gas station bathroom before buying another test on the way to the hospital where I worked as a labor and delivery nurse. The second test confirmed the first. I should have been planning how to tell Marcus. Instead, I found his car parked beside a silver sedan I had never seen before. For a long moment, I sat behind the steering wheel, hoping there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe a client. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe anything except what my instincts already knew. Then I noticed the bedroom curtains moving. Someone laughed. Not the deep laugh I had shared 1,000 evenings with. A woman's. I didn't cry. That surprised me more than anything else. I walked inside quietly, climbed halfway up the stairs, and heard Marcus say, "She'll believe whatever I tell her." "She always does," the woman laughed again. That was enough. I turned around, walked back downstairs, grabbed the overnight bag we kept in the hallway closet, and filled it with whatever my hands reached first. Jeans, sweaters, underwear, my nursing license. My passport. Nothing sentimental. Those belonged to a marriage that had already ended. I drove until the city lights blurred together, stopping only when I saw a small Italian restaurant called Vecchio's. It looked warm, ordinary, and completely unlike the expensive places Marcus insisted on taking clients. I ordered tea because my stomach refused food. Only then did I finally let myself cry. Not because Marcus had cheated, because my daughter, or son, I didn't know yet, deserved better than the family I had almost brought them into. Compliments of the gentleman in the corner. The waiter placed a plate of bruschetta in front of me. "I didn't order this." "I know." He smiled politely before walking away. Curious, I looked toward the back booth. An older man in a charcoal jacket lifted his coffee cup in greeting before returning to the book he had been reading. He didn't stare. He didn't smile. He simply waited. A few minutes later, he walked over. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, he pulled out the chair across from me. "I own the restaurant," he said calmly. "If you want me to leave, I will." Something about his voice felt strangely safe. "I'm Dante." "Amelia. You've had the worst day of your life." It wasn't a question. Before I realized what I was doing, the words spilled out. I told him about the pregnancy, about Marcus, about the woman upstairs, about leaving without a plan. When I finally stopped talking, I expected pity. Instead, Dante reached into his pocket and handed me a plain cream-colored card with only a phone number. "If tonight becomes tomorrow," he said quietly, "and tomorrow becomes unbearable, call this number." No questions? None. No conditions? Especially not. I slipped the card into my purse, convinced I would never use it. 4 days later, I proved myself wrong. Marcus called 23 times. He sent flowers to the hospital, then jewelry, then messages apologizing, then messages blaming me for leaving without listening. Finally, he texted, "Come home. Stop embarrassing us. Us, not me. Not our baby, us." I blocked his number. That night, I called Dante. A woman answered immediately. "What is your name?" "Amelia. We've been expecting your call." The sentence sent a chill through me. "How?" "You'll understand later. Please be ready in 20 minutes. Exactly 20 minutes later, a black SUV stopped outside my apartment. The driver introduced himself only as Marco. He carried my suitcase without speaking and drove nearly an hour beyond the city until iron gates appeared through the darkness. Behind them stood an old stone farmhouse surrounded by olive trees. An elderly woman opened the front door before we reached it. "I'm Lucia," she said warmly. "You must be hungry." No paperwork. No questions. No judgment. Only hot soup, clean sheets, and silence. For the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, I slept through the night. The peace lasted exactly 36 hours. On the second evening, Dante arrived carrying a folder instead of flowers. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I owe you the truth," he said. Then he opened the file. Inside were photographs of Marcus, bank records, newspaper clippings, and one sentence highlighted in yellow: "Federal investigation into Vincent Hale expands." I looked up. "I don't understand." "You will," Dante replied quietly. "And once you do, you'll realize your husband wasn't the most dangerous person inside that house." I stared at the folder, convinced there had to be some mistake. Marcus works in his father's company, I said. He's never even had a speeding ticket. Dante folded his hands. That's exactly why investigators kept watching him. People like Marcus don't usually know how much they're involved until it's too late. He explained that Vincent Hale's shipping company had spent years under investigation for laundering money through fake import businesses. Marcus had never been charged, but his name appeared often enough to attract attention. And me? You became important the moment you married him. The room suddenly felt colder. You think someone would come after me? I think people desperate enough to protect themselves rarely care who gets hurt. For the first time since leaving Marcus, I understood why fear had followed me even after I packed my suitcase. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was uncertainty. Over the following weeks, life settled into an unexpected rhythm. I worked temporary nursing shifts at a nearby clinic while staying at Lucia's farmhouse. She never treated me like a guest. Every morning she placed fresh bread on the table, reminded me to eat for the baby, and scolded me whenever I skipped breakfast. You are growing a little person, she'd say. Coffee is not a meal. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to care without expecting anything in return. Marcus, however, refused to disappear. He began sending emails from new addresses, each one more desperate than the last. First came apologies, then promises, then accusations that Dante had manipulated me. I ignored every message until one afternoon my phone rang from an unknown number. His voice sounded exhausted. Amelia, please just tell me where you are. No, I can explain everything. You already did. When? When you chose someone else. Silence filled the line. Then he whispered, I never stopped loving you. I looked down at the tiny ultrasound photo folded inside my wallet. You stopped long before I left. I ended the call. That night, Marco noticed fresh tire tracks outside the front gate. No one had permission to be there. The security cameras showed a dark sedan parked on the road for almost an hour before driving away. Dante arrived before sunrise. We're moving. Within 2 hours, I was packed again. The second farmhouse was smaller but better protected, hidden among rolling vineyards where the nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. I hated leaving. Not because of the house, because I was tired of running. Dante seemed to understand without my saying a word. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset stain the sky orange. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For the life you didn't choose. I looked toward the fields where the wind bent rows of tall grass. I stopped mourning that life the day I walked away. He nodded once. I was hoping you'd say that. Months passed. Winter surrendered to spring. My divorce moved through the courts faster than expected. Marcus never contested it. Nearly everything we owned had legally belonged to his father's businesses anyway. When the papers were signed, I left with my car, my nursing license, a few boxes of clothes, and complete peace. I had never owned less. I had never felt freer. 3 months later, labor began just after midnight. Old instincts took over. Even through the contractions, I caught myself timing them like I did for my patients. Lucia laughed. You really are a nurse. After 14 exhausting hours, my daughter entered the world screaming with astonishing determination. The doctor smiled. Healthy little girl. The moment they placed her in my arms, every frightening decision I had made suddenly made sense. I named her Gianna. The following afternoon, Dante quietly stepped into the hospital room, carrying white peonies. Months earlier, I'd casually mentioned they had been my mother's favorite flowers. He had remembered. He stood beside the bassinet without speaking for several seconds. Finally, he whispered, She's beautiful. I smiled. She is. Then he looked at me. No. His voice cracked for the first time. You are. You protected her before she ever took her first breath. No one had ever thanked me for surviving before. Only for enduring. That felt different. Life slowly became ordinary again. The investigation against Vincent Hale ended with a plea agreement. Marcus accepted a deal to cooperate with federal authorities before quietly moving across the country. He never once asked about Gianna. Surprisingly, that stopped hurting. Because by then I understood something important. Some people become parents through biology. Others become family through choice. A year after I first walked into Vecchio's carrying nothing but heartbreak, Gianna slept peacefully beneath an old oak tree while Dante and I shared coffee in the farmhouse garden. He reached for my hand. This time, neither of us pulled away. There were no dramatic speeches, no promises, just quiet certainty, the kind that grows slowly enough to survive every season. Looking back now, people often ask when my new life began. They assume it started the day my daughter was born, or the day my divorce became final. They're wrong. It began the moment I chose to leave a house where love had already disappeared. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't fighting to save what's broken. It's having the courage to walk away before it breaks you too. If my story reminded you that starting over is never the end, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the Revenge Tales. And remember this: the hardest door to close is often the one that leads you toward the life you were always meant to find.